Thanks for joining us today on Mormon Land, where we explore news in and about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm managing editor Dave Noyce. I oversee the Salt Lake Tribune's faith coverage. I'm joined again by senior religion reporter Peggy Fletcher-Stack. Hello, Peggy.
Hi, Dave.
We remind our listeners about another way to support Mormon Land. Just go to patreon.com, where with a small donation, as little as $3 a month, you can access transcripts to our podcasts, our complete newsletter, and all of our exclusive religion coverage. Again, that's Patreon, patreon.com/Mormonland. Now for today's show. Paying tithing at a time when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has tens of millions of dollars in surplus money. Lauding the faith's explicit neutrality stance in U.S. partisan politics, along with its implicit call for more Democrats in the pews. And then seeing the church's Utah Area Presidency embrace an effort to celebrate the Constitution by endorsing a group with multiple far-right ties. Add to that Senior Apostle Dallin Oaks' plea for young members to stop delaying marriage and child rearing while acknowledging the sometimes crippling barrier of housing costs. Yes, there has been no shortage of topics of late, to which Salt Lake Tribune columnist Gordon Monson could add his voice and views. Today, a little more than a year since he became a regular faith columnist, he joins us today via Zoom to discuss his recent commentaries. Gordon, welcome.
Hi, Dave. Hi, Peggy.
Glad to have you with us and taking a little time out from a break for you to do this. So,
all good.
So before we dive into your recent columns, how has commenting on the church and faith compared with doing so in sports, which you've done for decades?
Well, it's interesting because the second you express your opinion, you divide the room, right? It just divides the room. And I don't care whether you're just sitting around the Thanksgiving dinner table with your family or whether you're writing a column or doing commentary of other kinds. But I have learned that it does elicit responses from all over the place. And when I was doing that in sports, there were times when it was very, very, what's the word? Visceral, maybe. It's just very emotional at times because people take their sports so seriously, especially in a state like Utah, where at the college level, there's the blue and the red, and it gets pretty wild at times. And because I've expressed my opinion rather strongly, I have felt that. And I'll tell you why I do that, Dave and Peggy. Before I became a columnist, almost 40 years ago, I asked a couple of guys that I really respect in the business, that I respected back then, about writing columns. And one of them was Bill Plaschke at the LA Times. I worked with Bill. I was at the LA Times for 10 years. The other was Bill Roden, who was at that time with the New York Times, and then Mike Downey, also a renowned columnist. And I talked to them at length about writing columns. And they said, essentially, if you want to be a feature writer, be a feature writer. If you want to be a news writer, be a news writer. If you're going to be a columnist, have a point of view. And so I never forgot that. I can't remember what I did yesterday, Dave, but I remember that as clear as day. And so that's what I've done. I did it in sports, and now I'm doing it in religion. And as emotional as sports was, I think religion tops it. I mean, right. The last year has been a bit of a revelation for me, how strongly people feel about these kinds of topics. And it's good because I've always wanted to make people think. I've always wanted to I don't care if people agree with me or not. That doesn't matter. As I've told you before, my own mother disagrees with me half the time. So it doesn't bother me when people disagree. But I want people to think. And so that's what I try to do. But I really do believe what I write. Some people say, are accused of sort of, you don't even believe what you're writing. That's not true. It's worse than you think. I really do believe what I write, and I stay true to that. It's been a wild ride, Dave. And I know you and Peggy, first of all, you get a lot of readers, and kind of the stars of the Tribune. And I'm sort of invading that territory a little bit. But I assume that you guys who deliver news straight, you probably get a lot of that sort of back and forth as well. But I get it big time, no doubt.
So what's been rewarding about doing faith columns?
Well, first of all, these subjects are important to me. If I didn't care about them, I wouldn't write about them. And these are issues that I've given a lot of thought to. I mean, I'm not an academic the way Peggy is. I mean, she has spent her life studying this stuff. I've spent a good portion of my life living through these things and observing these things. And so I don't consider myself necessarily an expert, but I'm speaking to Joe and Jill Sixpack out there, and maybe that's a bad way of saying it to Latter-day Saint types. But I can feel at a level that I think a lot of people within the LDS framework, what they feel. And that's what I try to express from an honest, earnest standpoint from within my own soul.
So, Gordon, when your first couple of columns were they're kind of listy things you would like to see changed and things you like as is. But your recent columns have been very newsy, sort of more based on news events. Where do you get your ideas? What prompts you to write a column?
The spirit, Peggy.
All right.
I mean, no, I don't know. I'm living my life, and I'm experiencing these things that many members of the LDS Latter-day Saint faith, what they feel. And so I'm living this day by day at some level. I mean, some people think I'm the son of Beelzebub himself, but in my life, I'm trying to apply certain principles to my own life, and I observe how those principles apply to other people's lives and how it affects those lives. And then it's easy to find comment on that because it's all around me. And so that's sort of, I look for ideas based on, what comes down the news pipeline. And Dave has been great help to me in that regard, keeping me aware of the things that are going on. But a lot of this stuff just spills over to everyone. And that's who I'm talking to in these columns. Again, I don't expect people to all agree with the things I write, but the things I write about are affecting their lives, whichever side of an issue they might be on.
So, Gordon, some people believe that straight white men like you should never write about issues regarding women, LGBT members, or race. Yet you've written about all those things. What do you think about that?
Okay. Well, I'm not sure that I understand why I'm not allowed to think about these things. I mean, growing up, I had 4 sisters, and as an adult, I have 5 daughters and a wife who's a lot smarter than me. I have no sons. Now I have sons-in-law and I have grandsons, but I'm surrounded by women who are constantly giving me feedback about what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. And so I think that does give me some license to comment on those things. I'm not Black. I'm not a minority. I've never had my DNA tested to find out, if I have African blood in me. But again, I observe what is happening around me, and I have opinions about those things. And I'm not just sitting in a vacuum here making up these opinions. I'm out talking to people and finding out what they are experiencing, and then trying to echo bits and pieces of that to the audience, whoever they are. And it doesn't really matter to me if the issue isn't solely about white men. And I will say this about the Latter-day Saint situation. In my opinion, the church would do itself a great favor by empowering women more. And I think that would solve so many of the issues that some people have with the church if they would empower women more. And why do I know that? I'm not a woman. But I have women all around me, and I talk to them, and I don't want to blame my opinions on anybody who's close to me, but I talk to these individuals, and they don't have the forum I have. And so I utilize the forum that I do have in order to echo some of the things that I think are affecting folks.
So, Gordon, let's turn to some recent developments. What did you think of the First Presidency's update on political neutrality and where they warned against straight ticket voting? You wrote a column about that. What did you think? Just briefly.
I was very complimentary of that, and I thought it was about time. And I think that needs to be hammered again and again and again when you see all the straight ticket voting, especially in the state of Utah, but you see it other places as well. And you certainly see it within the Latter-day Saint culture. This is, I don't know what the motivation was here. I don't know if the church is trying to protect itself, to keep its tax-free status, or whether it's what its motivation, whether it's trying to hang on to younger people who they seem to be having a difficult time hanging on to, at least some of them, because they are turned off by this sort of connection with the far right wing. And so I think it was smart of the church to do that. And it was necessary for the church to do that. And I think they need to go beyond what they've already done. I think they should hammer that over and over again. It's ridiculous to think that in order to be a good Mormon, you have to be a freaking Republican. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And people should be able to have whatever political view they want and still worship God with their fellow brothers and sisters.
So along that line, what did you think about the Utah Area Presidency's letter on the Constitution and its endorsement of this group, Why Love America, that has multiple far-right ties?
Yeah, I thought that was a mistake. That's my opinion. I think it, as I wrote, and a column that will be posted when, Dave, tomorrow, I guess?
Yes.
That I think those kinds of statements with that kind of connection blows a hole in the hull of what the church had issued earlier with their message about being thoughtful in voting and avoiding some sort of connection with only one group. That I don't, not only that, but one of my problems with that particular message was, what is the church doing connecting itself in any way, shape, or form with that? That to me, and if these are general authorities that are issuing these kinds of messages, how about going back to faith and hope and repentance and extending charity to people and believing in Christ? What the hell? Why are you getting involved in politics? That just doesn't make sense to me, and I think it's an unwise move.
What do you think the church could do on these political issues?
Well, I think they should go back to what they said in that original message about being thoughtful before you vote. They were saying, yeah, there might be a principle here or there that lines up with what the church teaches, but they don't want people to just go into the voting booth and just go R. That's what I got from that message. And so if they can continue to extend that to their followers, to establish in their own minds what they believe politically and to go ahead and do it. I didn't get the impression that the church was telling anybody who to vote for, but I thought they were saying what not to vote for. And that was people who aren't compassionate, people who aren't kind, people who are extreme.
So let's turn to another topic that's had a lot of attention. Lots has emerged and is still emerging on the church's wealth. Is that the reason you took on the topic of tithing in a recent column?
It's part of the reason. The way I look, I'm not a prophet. I'm not an apostle. Although it would be a lot of fun to do that. I'd like to give that a try, Dave. I don't know exactly how that would go. Maybe we chase some folks out, but maybe we might be able to get some people in the tent. But anyway, I think the church has done a wonderful job for itself to collect riches And there was a time when the church was poor and there was a need for more money. They needed money to sustain the thing. But the church is not in that condition now. And that's why I don't fully understand exactly why the church is continuing to have people pay tithing. I know some people say, no, we don't want to cheat people out of the blessings that come from paying tithing. And I have no problem paying tithing. I mean, it hasn't really affected my life in any kind of bad way. But when I see other people who are really struggling financially, and I'm not saying struggling to the point where they need aid from the church. I know bishops sometimes apply that aid to people where they see it, but there's a whole lot of folks out there who are regular working people who feel like they have to give up 10% of what their increase is in order to stay in good standing with the church. And I don't know whether Sister Thompson's $3,000 or Brother Perkins' $5,000 is really going to make a difference with the church when they've got billions and billions and billions. And these folks are real people who are making great sacrifice in order to give the church money that it doesn't need. And to me, it makes more sense if the church needs it, then okay, I can understand it a little more. But I don't get why people are saying, well, you need to pay this in order to get a temple recommend. I mean, that to me is unseemly. That to me doesn't feel right. And I can't, it's hard for me to picture a God that is sitting there saying, give me this money when you're trying to pay for your kids' college education or to give your kids some sort of opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I don't want to encourage as a God situation to say, hey, go out and get into debt so that you can fulfill this commandment and still give your kids some sort of opportunity. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me for people who are in that kind of condition. If the church needs the money, then yeah, on a needs basis, then yeah, go ahead and pay it. But when you've got 150 billion or whatever it is in reserves, and you've got a whole lot more than that in total, I'm not sure why you're exacting $3,000 from Sister Thompson, who's a single mom with 3 kids trying to feed her kids and keep a roof over a house. And Sister Thompson doesn't want to go to the church for a handout, doesn't want to put herself in that situation.
Yeah, see, that's one of the questions I was going to ask you, Gordon, and you're sort of touching on it now, is tithing, which literally means a tenth, of course, but the principle is a donation, I guess. Should it be different? Should it vary depending on your circumstances as to what you give? I mean, a really wealthy member, let's say Mitt Romney, he could pay $10 million and he still wouldn't fill it. But this Sister Thompson you're talking about gives far less and fills it a lot.
Right.
What do you think about that?
Well, the way the church looks at it and the way the strong believers, they say, well, you don't want to cheat Sister Thompson out of the opportunity to get God's blessings for paying that $3,000. But I'm not sure that always applies in a situation where Sister Thompson is doing the best she can to be a responsible citizen without looking for any kind of handout. I guess if I were making the rules, and I'm not, but if I were making the rules, I would have it be a free will situation. And I don't like the connection between what you pay or paying a certain amount and getting into the temple. Mm-hmm. The church talks a lot about the blessings of the temple and everything that comes from that access to God's house. But if you have to pay money to get in there, does that sound like something God would require? I'm not sure I have the answer. That's why that column on tithing was filled with questions, not declarative statements. Because I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me that an organization that may have upwards of $500 billion is asking for that kind of sacrifice from folks who could really benefit from not making it.
Would you feel the same if the church didn't have all this money? In other words, is there a problem just in the principle and its perhaps uneven application? as opposed to the church has the means. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand it more if there's a huge need there, but there's not a huge need there. And some people say, well, that fluctuates from time to time. Well, when you get into that $500 billion mark, I mean, I think you're relatively secure financially, while other people who are good people, who are believers, are trying to do the right thing. They want to go to the temple. They want to feel the Spirit that's there. But I know people who live all the commandments that are laid down in the Latter-day Saint tradition, and they can't go to the temple because they can't pay their tithing. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. You guys are the religion experts. I don't know if it makes sense to you, but I can't put two and two together. And I've tried to do some study on tithing, and I understand that it has fluctuated from time to time. It's not just a matter of going back to the Old Testament and saying, hey, look, this was a commandment back then. I just don't think that I think the connection between paying out money and getting into heaven, there's just something, I have a disconnect with that. And I know some people say, well, it's a reflection of faith. I understand that, but these people are in need. They're in need of having some of the things in life that benefit their lives, not just because they want to go out and buy a 25-foot boat.
So a little bit tangentially, but what did you think about President Oaks' talks to young people on marriage and having kids? And he did touch on finances. Yeah,
I'm not sure. I don't know what the motivation was for that. Are they trying to increase the membership of the church by having more kids born into it? And then they can pay more tithing? I don't know whether that was it or what his motivation was there, because that is an extremely personal decision for people to make. And anybody who feels like they need to be hurried up in order to either get married or have kids, man, I tell you, if you're dancing down that road, there's a whole lot of pain that can come along with it, not just happiness. I mean, I think I'm a fan of marriage because my wife's a lot smarter than I am, and she's been a blessing in my life. And I'm so glad that I've been able to do that and have a family and enjoy some of those things. But for other people, if they hurried up their decision, then they make a bad decision. It's a whole lot better not to be married than to have to go through multiple divorces.
A final question, Gordon. Okay.
Yeah.
What do you hope your faith columns ultimately do?
That's an interesting question, because I get a whole lot of feedback from people who are inside the faith. And in some cases, they're firmly inside the faith, and in some cases, they're barely hanging on. And they thank me over and over again for discussing some of the things that are on their mind and weighing heavy on their spirits. And they're grateful that there's a situation where someone is willing to talk about some of these things in a public way that they can relate to. And so I like hearing from those people. There are others that I hear from who say, what the hell are you doing? Are you trying to drag people away from the church? Are you trying to damage the church? No. I mean, if I didn't care about the church, I wouldn't write about it. But I do care about it, and it has been meaningful in my life. So I hope I can stir some thought. I don't know whether you guys, I don't know, do the quote unquote general authorities ever listen to what Dave Noyce writes or what Peggy Fletcher Stack writes? Do they read this stuff? Do they hear what's being said or what's being communicated? I know you guys play it very straight, and that's good because that's your job. But for me, I'm trying to represent a certain thought process that a lot of people have. Not everybody. Everybody's a little different, and I'm not trying to represent everybody. But I tell you, I would love to sit down with President Nelson and have a chat with him. I'm not sure that would ever happen.
We would like that interview too. Yes.
Yeah, I would love to have that conversation, and I have had that conversation. I had that conversation with Thomas S. Monson. I was at a tennis match. His grandson was playing in a tennis match, And my daughter was playing in the tennis tournament. And I walked into a stadium where he was sitting on one side of the bleachers. And I came in and sat down. And I saw him there. And I said, I'm not going to go over. He's talking to people and it's all a hubbub that goes with it. And he eventually came over to me. He came over to me and extended his hand. And he said, I guess one Monson ought to be courteous enough to come introduce himself to another. So I had that conversation. And then we talked about some things. It was rather interesting. But what am I trying to accomplish? I'm just trying to bring to light some things that are on folks' minds. And I know that you guys, intellectuals, study this stuff out. And a lot of these questions have been asked that I'm posing in previous environments. But there's a lot of people out there who are trying to understand, who have questions, who want to believe, who want to live a productive spiritual life. And then there are some who don't. I get that too. But I would like to touch the lives of people, or at least allow them to know that other people have some of the questions that they do. And if we can find some solutions along the way, then that would be 10 times better.
So you want to keep doing it?
Well, I've only had 2 death threats. So I guess, as I said earlier, Dave, I know you guys are students of religion, and I am sort of, I don't know what, I wouldn't call myself necessarily a student of it, but certainly I'm living my life in an environment where the Latter-day Saint theology plays a role in what happens. And so it is important to me. And I would like to continue to address issues and talk about things that are important to people. And that's why so many people read the things that you guys write, is because all of these issues, all of these items, all of these features, they connect with people in a way that is probably more powerful than just about any other way. Except for maybe nowadays, politically, folks get pretty emotional about that stuff too. Yeah. But religion is important to people, and that's why they read this stuff.
Well, good, because I'm expecting a column from you again next month, Gordon. So
I got some ideas, Dave. Some ideas. I just hope I don't get thrown out before.
Gordon Monson, thanks for joining us today.
Okay, thanks, Peggy. Thanks, Dave.
And thanks to Peggy Fletcher Stack.
Always a pleasure.
And to our producer, Chris Samuels. We remind you that you can keep up on all the happenings in and about the church by subscribing to the Salt Lake Tribune's free Mormon Land newsletter. Just go to sltrib.com to sign up, and we'll talk again next time on Mormon Land.